Welcome to this episode of the Compressor Guru. Today, in our ongoing work on the IR2545 air compressor, we are doing the cleaning and reassembling of the pistons and rings on the high pressure side and showing you how to index your cylinders and heads for proper reassembly. And now, the Compressor Guru.
So something the Guru didn't do while we had our parts soaking was I wanted to show you very specifically de-ringing this and cleaning the grooves for the compressor rings. I'm actually going to break one of these rings on purpose and make a tool out of it here in a minute. We're going to take our piston pin out, get rid of our connecting rod, because it'll probably be easier to flip this over. Got to get her gripped. So there's keepers in each end of your piston. I already removed that one. I already removed both of those. Whoops. Sorry, folks. Anyway, there's keepers in each end of that piston. Take a brass bunch or whatever you may have. And drive your piston out. That is a perfectly good piece of aluminium that will go to the scrapyard as soon as we drive that out. So now I can turn that over and set it. Let's take our rings off. This has been sitting in fuel for a couple weeks to loosen any carbon that may have built up. There we go. Little pair of needle nose. This is a 3-piece oil ring, and you have to look closely. I don't know if you can see that, Val. Find the end of the oil ring, take it off, and there's the other end, and that's not the way this went together. It shouldn't have gone together that way. Take that off, and then you have an expander that goes underneath those to keep them on. So we don't have a lot of carbon, but what we're going to do on the top two is we're going to break one. And this is now a handy dandy tool. Don't do that with a new ring. Drag it around. And we're getting very little buildup carbon out of there. You can see very, very little carbon being built up. I just wiped it off. Let's do the next ring down. And very little carbon on it. That's why you have all this laundry to do, Val, is I wipe my finger on my pants too often. This is not a step you want to skip. In case you were pushing oil up past the rings, this carbon would be heavier, and if that carbon were heavier, when you put your new ring in the slot, your new ring may stick. Your new ring may stick and not accomplish the free movement it needs to be moving around in that slot. I'm going to go back to the parts washer. We're not going to bore you with that. I'm going to clean this up in the parts washer a little bit more now that the rings are off. Let me pop the high pressure side apart. I already took the keepers out of this one. And another good piece of scrap. This pin looks good on that one. And that one looks good. Sorry folks, I don't remember doing that. I already took the rings off this one. Let's run our ring around. We got a little more carbon buildup in this one. Do it this way. I don't know what's better for the camera. Would you like that light that is on the press valve?
No.
Let's do the next one. And I'm holding the, in the oil ring, I'm holding the end of the broken ring. I'm using the good side. Little tiny bit in the oil slot. Now I'm getting in the second slot. Oh, this is a good one to show a good example. We got a nice piece of sludge and carbon buildup right on the ring on this one. There we go. Gonna get this for a nice white background. Can you see all that carbon that we just dug out of that ring? And that's why we do this. So because Bud's back hurts, because he's fat, old, and arthritic, he's going to take a break, but the Guru will return. We're going to put the pistons in the parts washer, and we're going to get them nice and perfectly clean. Well, nice and clean. Guru is going to install some wrist pins, and then we're going to put some rings on the pistons, then we're going to load the pistons into the cylinder walls. And we'll do it in that order. There's a snap ring that goes into the end of the piston that holds the piston pin or wrist pin from coming out the end. So I'm going to put the snap ring into the end of the pin boss or the opening in the piston. There we go. And that's in place. Brand new rod. Test fit it on the pin to make sure. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to take a fingerful of compressor oil and put some oil on that dry bronze bushing or brass bushing, whichever it is. I assume it's brass. We'll put it in there and gently tap our pin back through. And we can't go too far. I'm not going to hit real hard. We're against the other, we're against the pin on the other side. Put this snap ring in. It's nice and free. And there we go. That's all there is to putting the new rod in the piston. We'll do the high pressure piston now. Put our snap, and this is too low for the back. Put the high pressure piston in now. The snap ring positioned. Yep. We'll do that again. That's in the right place. Another new rod. These rods are identical. It doesn't matter which way we put them when we load them into the cylinders, but right now it doesn't matter which way we put them when we put them in the piston. Get a little oil for that dry bushing, and let's test fit it. Beautiful. That's about all there is to it. All these parts have been cleaned. Beautiful. There we go. That one didn't make a snap, but I put it in perfect. The connecting rods are installed in the pistons now. Snap rings are in place. Hey, Mrs. Bud, did I miss anything? Okay, we're going to move on. We're going to move over to the vise. We'll do the high pressure piston first. We took and cleaned, I showed you how to break a ring and cut the carbon out of the ring groove. And I soaked these in our parts washer and then cleaned them up very nice. This is like a brand new piston. So before we install the rings in the cylinder or on the piston and load the piston in the cylinder, this is where, if you've never done one of these before, is your strongest possibility to make a mistake. We're going to start with the piston. It will be in here like this, or we'll put the main bearing on, or the rod bearing on. But this dipper goes down to splash the oil to lubricate the bearing and the rest of the compressor. There's also a dipper on the other one that will, if we put it in the same way, the dipper would be pointing towards the wall. So that piston will go like that. But we're looking at the high pressure side first. The high pressure side, but the high pressure cylinder is offset towards the crankshaft, and it's the one that will take this piston. So this piston will go into this cylinder. This gasket is symmetrical all four ways. It doesn't matter. It'll match up to the bolt holes no matter which way you go. We can turn it over, matches up. We can go each of the four ways that we could put it on, and it doesn't matter. However, our head only matches up to this hole matches this hole there and there. If we turn it this way, we might be able to get one bolt hole started, but that one is not lining up to that bolt hole. If we're 180 degrees off, that lines up. This one doesn't line up. And if we're just 90 degrees off again, can barely even get one to line up. We get this one line up and none of the other three. So what you want to do is, before you start loading your piston, you want to take and you want to make a reference mark here and here. Remember, this is your output. This side bolts onto your intercooler. It's flanged. Your output is threaded. The same with the low pressure side. The side that comes this way is threaded. The other side's threaded for the air filter. This side's threaded for the pipe that goes to your tank. You put an index mark here. We now know that this fits onto this cylinder this way, and all 4 bolts will line up perfectly. We put an index mark here that matches this index mark. So when we go to load the compressor, we will have this piston loaded into this cylinder like this. And then when we go and put it on the shaft, everything's going to line up just right. Otherwise, you're going to get on and your intercooler and your discharge you may get them to bolt up here, because you can put this on this way and that's fine, but your head won't be right. So you need to make sure that you figure out which side goes towards the crankshaft or which side goes towards the oil fill plug, and make sure that your head fits on that correctly, because don't forget, your piston has to have the sling. This is an oil slinger. It goes down. The piston needs to load into this like this. This line has to line up with that line. I put those lines on with a handy dandy little U marker, which we sell. And I put the little mark on the head. My wife is wonderful at advertising. So this, if you're going to make a mistake, I would put money on you making this mistake. I'm trying to warn you up front. You'll thank me in the morning. This is your oil ring working in companion. This is an oil expander ring working in companion with your 2 oil wiper rings. We're going to put this on. See, this separates right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on with that gap over top of the pin boss. So the gap ends up being directly lined up with the end of the wrist pin. Double check and make sure you don't have disc rings. Quincy's, for example, have 4 of these in their ring kit. 2 are dished, they go under compression rings, and the 2 that are your oil rings are flat. So I just checked it. I might take a whiteboard and draw this out, but we take 90 degrees, maybe a little further away from the gap on the oil ring, the expander ring. We take and slip that on. On the other side, we do the same thing. So the bottom ring, I left the gap on the wiper looking down at it this way, about 3 o'clock. At 6 o'clock is where the expander ring butts together, and at 9 o'clock is where I'm going to put this gap on the top of the expander ring. Camera wife, would you like to get real good tight on that, on this and this? Now this will spin. We can make the adjustment, but we will put it back in place. There, it's back in place. Back hurts. I'm going to do that good close-ups now. Need a light?
Here.
Can you see the ring yet? Good.
Okay.
Okay. Get in real tight. Where are we?
Oh, you just moved it.
Oh, there we are. I want you to get in real tight on the end of my finger. Pointing this way. Sorry. Okay, right here you can see where the butt of each side of that ring butts together. It is possible, and a bad thing, if when you put that expander ring on, you can accidentally overlap that. You've got to make sure they don't overlap, because this now is set for the right size for the bore of that cylinder. Let's put a couple of compression rings on, load this piston, and put the high pressure piston in the machine. Always look for a pip. And there's the pip. And unfortunately, this aftermarket set of rings did not come with instructions. This ring has a slight bevel to the inside of the top, right there, and underneath it's plain, and when it compresses it overlaps. So your ring gap might finally end up being like that, but you have a little tab here and a little tab here. I'm going to save that for the top piston. Here's the theory. If that's the top piston and we have pressure pushing down on it, and we have any air getting past that ring, I like to think that the air may help push that ring, because of that bevel, push it out and tighten against the cylinder wall. There's a pip on this. That the pip almost always indicates the top. Since there's no instructions with this kit, I'm going to assume that's the top. This is a pretty plain generic ring. There is a little offset ledge right where my fingernail is. There's a little offset ledge. I'm going to install that. And yes, I do have a smaller pair of ring pliers. I'm just used to this. I'm a big guy, that fits my hand. If you are using a wrong set, do not go nuts and do that. You will break the ring, and then you'll be waiting on parts. And Bud, not the Guru, has done that in the past. Don't tell anybody. And real easy. The Guru's nice and clean. It moves around nice. And we're going to put that at 7 o'clock. We're going to put the next one on. The pip in the ring. Can you see that in the camera? There's a little tiny pip right there.
Okay.
Okay. That pip goes up. And we're going to put this one on top. Gently. Don't want to break those tabs at the ring gap. And that's it. And we're going to put this one about 10 o'clock. And the other one about 7. And our rings are all positioned. We're going to go back to the stand. We're going to go back to the forklift, and we're going to install this in the cylinder, and we know that we have everything indexed. Okay, these are in place. I'm going to move that gasket so we don't oil it. I'm going to put a touch of oil on our rings. I'm going to grab them all, move them a little wee bit. Now remember, we are indexed. I have the mark on this. This rod goes this way, so we're just going to go right over. Come over here, babe. Take a shot. I'm putting a little bit of oil on the bevel. This is machined in a bevel. Do not use a ring compressor and try to load these through the top. First off, the wrist pin won't go through this hole, or the main part of the rod, the crank part of the rod won't go through this hole. They bevel these so that you can gently work them a little wee bit. There, that's loaded. And all we're waiting to do is flip it over and hook it on. I'm going to get our main bearing out now. There's a brand new main bearing. We're going to slip it on. We wouldn't have to, but I don't want to booger the inside of that rod against the rough surface that the inside of this goes to. This bearing is symmetrical. It's beveled here. It's beveled here. It doesn't matter which way. I'm going to slide the bearing on. And I thought we'd get it on there easy. Take my giant brass punch and just add a little bit. So I started this a little crooked on camera. I took and I looked at it, got it lined up. We're going to bumper the rest of the way on very gently. I'm going to hammer for very gently. Uh-oh. Very gently. Uh-oh. There we go. I'm going to have to alternate in between top and bottom to drive it on there. Do not drive on that bushing with a steel punch. Only use brass. If you don't have brass, find a piece of 2x4 or hardwood. If you hit that with a hammer, you're liable to put a ding in it and shorten your rod bearing or your rod life.